Lesser Light, a special bonus episode. Good morning, it's me, Matt Draper here. I wanted to wish you all a very happy Christmas. I know that Christmas can be particularly difficult for people who have experienced spiritual abuse, especially within Christian environments, who might find the imagery and the loss of previous experiences of Christmas very hard. But also anyone who's been through trauma and is having to do a lot of Christmas socializing. It's not always easy to do. We didn't want you to feel alone this Christmas, so Richard and I got together to have a chat about some of the connecting experiences of escaping trauma and some of the ways we can look at recovery going into the new year. Richard Turner is a therapist and has his own website, To Think Again. He also talks about his own experiences in cult-like environments on a YouTube series where he plays Minecraft while talking cults and high-control environments. Richard has not had a chance to read Lesser Light yet, and this discussion isn't just about the book, but rather about the behind-the-scenes theories, which were some of the things I tapped into while writing and exploring these characters, and particularly Harry's journey. There's more to say, but I don't want to be too spoilery about the rest of the story. Hopefully we will have another chance to chat about some of the later episodes. So I'm here with my friend Richard, who I describe as a cult psychologist, with a master's in cults.
Yes, a master's in the psychology of coercive control. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I say cult psychology, but it is coercive control.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's similar psychology across a number of different contexts, and cults, of course, is one of them. So yes, you could argue that most definitely.
Yeah, and that's what you did your dissertation on, is that right?
Yes, I did my dissertation on. I transcribed talks from Hillsong Church and a C3 church, and compared them to a talk from a multi-level marketing company, a conference at a multi-level marketing company. So I analysed the coercion and persuasion used in the talks, compared the church to MLMs.
Okay, that makes sense, because a lot of churches, the sort of the big mega churches that we're talking about in this kind of literature can be compared to businesses, can't they?
Yeah, well, they are businesses. They literally are. I mean, the only difference is there's a spiritual mission in some way, but even then, you can argue that MLMs have some kind of like mission.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's just different language in a lot of ways, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. The main character in Lesser Light is going through his journey of kind of realizing that the big church that he was part of was more controlling than he realized at the time, I think, and trying to adjust to the real world, having escaped out of that kind of world. So I think, I don't know what you've sort of seen or what you've experienced when it comes to people who have been inside of a cult-like institution trying to adjust back to normal life. I wonder if you've got anything.
Well, yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Is the answer to that. I mean, to condense it down to something useful, I'll just try and pick up some key points. But obviously, I counsel people as a therapist, people who have been in religious cults, or other types of cults as well, and then are trying to rebuild their life. So, in terms of people leaving, the whole cult environment, all your reference points for the way you understand the world come from the cult. So it can be everything from having to learn the way people speak, the way people interact with each other, the way people greet each other. Just the basics of social communication can be completely different, all the way to that's probably on a simpler, more obvious basic level, but also to a very deep level. Who am I? Where do I fit in the world? If God isn't angry at me and I'm not doing this for God, then what is my mission in life, and where do I fit in? And so, from the very basic things to the way you communicate with someone, right to the depths of the big questions of life, where do I fit in? When people leave these kind of groups, that they're experiencing those two extremes and everything in between, to the shallow to the really deep.
Yeah.
So you get people who, on a very basic level, who've been in cults since birth, haven't had much access to technology even, because they've never been allowed to watch the sinful YouTube or Netflix or anything like that. And they've never been allowed to even like have a bank card. So some of the more extreme ones, they don't know how to go to a bank and use a cash machine, and on the deeper level, they've spent the whole life fitting into this mold, behaving a certain way, being submissive, being so compliant. They don't realize they're allowed to say no to things. They don't realize that they're allowed to have hobbies or do fun things. There's a huge breadth of things people can be experiencing when they get out of a cult, from the very deep questions of life to just basics on how you interact with other people and practicalities of life. So that's a very quick answer to how people can sometimes experience. Well as catastrophic low self-esteem as well, often as well, because that's part of the control. So
I think this is one of the things that affects the main character of Lesser Light, Harry, is this low self-esteem, because he a lot of the time is just observing everyone around him and assuming that their motives are bad, or assuming that their motives are the same as his motives, and he feels this separation from everyone around him, because I think partly because of how cults can be all encompassing, and you almost have this sort of Borg-like, Star Trek Borg-like connection with one another when you're inside that kind of world. And I think for this character, he's gone out of that world into the normal world, and he's trying to find connections and finding that really difficult.
It's interesting you've said that, because from some of the stories I've heard, it often comes as a massive surprise when someone leaves a cult. They make friends in the outside world, and the friends are quite accepting of them, because they're expecting this punishment. They're expecting this zero tolerance for any difficulty, and they often can't process it. Like, what I've messed up, and you actually forgiven me, and you're not humiliating me. You're just accepting me for who I am. So I've come across that quite a bit. And you mentioned earlier about the motives of people, the distrust that's sown in the cult environment, because everything's reported back to the leader, and even like small things are seen as the most sinful thing in the entire world, and there's this horrible punishment. So some people, they get publicly humiliated, and they have to confess their sins in a group or on stage, even as a child sometimes, and then the people then they get out into the real world, and they don't have to do that, and these things that they thought were really, really sinful are actually just normal human experiences. I mean, and sexual things particularly. So you will feel sexual arousal around certain people who whoever you're attracted to. That's not evil. That's normal for a human being.
Yeah, definitely.
And with people who've grown up in kind of very strict cults, sometimes they're ashamed and embarrassed and all sorts of things like that. So and because of the humiliation, the trust is totally shattered and then they get out, and they can be those things, and they're like, is it safe to? Can I trust the people around me? Can I be attracted to someone? Can I sleep with my partner and not get reported, or So if I've gone off topic on your question there, please bring me back on, because sometimes I get asked a question, I talk for like 5 minutes, and I think I can't remember what I was originally asked.
No, it's interesting, because you got such sort of like a breadth of understanding of this kind of stuff, and I find that really interesting. A few days into the story, really, by the time we're picking up now, so I'm sort of at a place where he's already been caught up in a cult. I describe it as a cult-like environment, and what he kind of went through when he first got there, and this is what he struggles with now, I think, is that he was like given lots of love and affection, it seemed, by this church environment, and was unable to realize just how controlling they were being. Is that something that you would often see?
Oh yeah. And you mentioned, I think this comes back to what you said before about motives. Like, people will be very, very nice, and we call it love bombing, don't we? In that arena, as a way to get you to like them, to make you feel like you're safe. And also, the love bombing can sometimes stop you listening to those red flags, those gut feelings, because they're being overly nice. And then you learn later on that actually there's another motive. They're being nice to you because they want something, because they want you to commit, because they want
Money
you
and
to
time.
give time, give money, things like that. And then you get the other thing is we talk about with clients a lot is you get what they say is often not what they're doing. So they say they love you, they care about you, but if you look at the behaviors, it doesn't demonstrate that. The classic cult thing is what they're saying is different to what they're doing. The reason why it's messing with your head is because you've been told over and over again you loved, you cared about, and it causes a lot of confusion, and because you don't know why you're feeling depressed, why you're feeling low, why you're feeling like there's something wrong with you, because these people love me. So it can't be them that's the problem, as they slowly dismantle my mind and make me feel guilty for every tiny mistake.
And they have like a way of picking out and sort of almost picking out vulnerable people in a way. Because I mean, I know that Harry, the guy from this book, he had just come out of like a really horrible argument with his family, went to this church environment, and they were immediately like, "Oh well, we won't never be horrible to you here." And then and then finds that all of his money, all of his time, and he's becoming obsessed in this environment where it suddenly finds it hard to work out what's real and what's not real, because they're talking about miracles all the time, talking about supernatural events, things like that. And he's now like sort of, it's a few years afterwards, but he's really trying to grapple with, did I see anything? Like, what was real, what was not real in that space? And I think it's interesting that, they just know the right time to like pick people out.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things I've noticed as well is, so, everybody has transition periods in their life where a relationship ends, or they fall out with someone and they change job, or where there's a switching season. Sorry to use a Christian word there, season, but switching season. And in those times, you're looking for something new. Things feel unstable when you lose something. So where can I get the stability from? And I think a lot of these groups, wherever you're at, whatever the loss is, wherever the need is, that's where they target in at. So, you're struggling to find a job. Oh, let us help you write your CV, or we've got someone in church actually who's got their own company, or you're lonely, you've just moved to town. Oh, come to our students event. Come to our Christmas meal. Come to our. So wherever you're at on that hierarchy of needs, the Maslow thing. They seem to target in where whatever the need is, they'll fulfill it. And I think as well, if things do feel very unstable and uncertain, you get a lot of certainty in cults. It is like this. This is the rule. This is and it can in the early days be quite comforting for people, I think. So
but that's the question really, is like, how is that different to a normal social setting, like a sort of a local community, or a community group, or like a healthy workplace, where you're also wanting to belong and to be a part of it, and that you would expect to do good things for each other. I guess what would be the difference between those?
I suppose the one word that stands out to me a lot with a lot of this, and a lot of things I discuss with clients, is boundaries. Are you still allowed to be an individual? Are they trying to change you into something else? Are they crossing emotional and psychological boundaries by telling you who you are? Are they trying to get you to commit more? Time boundaries? Are they pushing the time boundaries? Yeah, but boundaries is a big thing. And also, like, are you okay to just do that one thing with them? You're not asking to do more and more and more, things like that.
And I suppose it's that ability to just be able to leave it, or to stay with it, or to make your own choices in that space. Which can be unsettling when you've been in that environment, to then go into another one and to not be in that sort of unhealthy space. You're kind of feeling a bit almost rejected, I would say. You can feel almost rejected being in a normal environment.
That's an interesting point, because one thing that, especially like with the coercive control and domestic abuse and things, and when people come out of cults and they go into a new environment, and because there's no drama, because it's peaceful, they can almost start to feel like it's boring. Or because there's not this intensity, there's almost like have I done something wrong? Like,
that's it.
am I a bad person because you're not constantly like monitoring me all the time? And they can get all sorts of strange things happening, and it can take a while for people to settle into like just regular friendships, regular relationships where it is very laid back if it's healthy, usually, and it can be unsettling for people because they almost try and fill that void again. Because I sometimes I see it as because of the control and the isolation, they create a bit of an addiction to the group. So because they isolate you from the people around you, and they start saying things about your family, and maybe you shouldn't be mixing with this person, maybe this person isn't right for you or healthy for you, they then become your source of support, but they're also the source of damage. So you end up going back to them to get that reassurance and feel safe again, but you don't know if you're going to get that or get the punishment again. And I think it almost creates like a bit of an addictive behavior where because there's nowhere else to go. And I think when people get out, they'll try and look for it again to get that because of the trauma they suffer. I think that's something like that going on within it.
And within those environments, you're often told either this is good or this is bad. And so you get that validation, you get that feedback. So you do a thing, you get the feedback instantly. Yes, you've made a good point, or no, you've made a terrible point. You're out of the group. I think, for the character in my book, he'll drop a story into a conversation, for example, and then immediately be looking to see, oh, I've said something terrible. Oh, nobody laughed, so I must have done something really bad. And when I was reading back over my book, later, when I was recording the audio version, I was like, kind of comes across as like a bit like self-focused, or a bit, he comes across quite selfish in a way, because he's almost become obsessed with wanting people to give him validation. And I was thinking, well, that, does that make him a bad person? But really, that's part of that whole loop, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I should imagine so. Yeah. If he's been rejected a lot and it's very black and white and he's been punished for having certain beliefs and thoughts, then you've still got a need there to feel good and validated. And so then you start chasing it. And if it's only the group there because they cut you off from everybody else, it'll be the group that you go to, the leaders that you go to, because there isn't, because I mean, you mentioned earlier about a healthy group or not healthy group. Well, an unhealthy group will be trying to isolate you from anyone who isn't in the group because they're a threat. You often have narcissistic leaders here who have abandonment issues, so they don't want to be abandoned. So what do? Get rid of all the threats for them to be abandoned. Anyone that will criticize them, anyone that might wake them up, like a family member going, "What are you doing? This isn't healthy." They need to be got rid of because otherwise the leader will get abandoned, and they don't want to be abandoned. And that's where a lot of the control is coming from: abandonment issues in the leadership. But I mean, spiritualized. Sorry to interrupt you. Spiritualized though, so it's more powerful.
And they get like a godlike power to be able to say you're in, you're out. In this story, you've got like the cons, which are like the Christians, and you've got the non-cons, which are like non-converts, and so they're just like they're literally called non-cons because they're out of the main group, and there's that separation again there,
which is the classic cult language. It's the us and them thing. It's the dispensing of existence. I think Lifton called it in his brainwashing theory.
Dispensing of existence.
We get to decide who's in and who's out, who gets to exist and who doesn't.
Wow.
Who and it's very black and white. And if you're either with us or you're against us, there's no. It's a very black and white world. Which, and you mentioned earlier about what happens when people come out. Well, they struggle with grey areas. They struggle with perfectionism. Because it's either good or bad, so everything has to be perfect. Otherwise, they feel very depressed and anxious. Because that is part of the control, and the external control, they internalize it. It becomes their own thought processes then, and that's the way they think. So when someone's in therapy, we're helping them to go back into that grey world again, where it's okay to have imperfections, and other people are allowed to have imperfections as well, and it's okay. And as part of the recovery.
That's really good. That's really helpful. That's really helpful to know. Like it's really what I want people to be able to have a conversation about is about recovery, because you can get, I think, with sort of PTSD symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, you can get stuck in a space where you feel like in danger all the time. I would say, and in order to get out of that space, you kind of have to take yourself on a journey, or go to therapy, or go, begin to understand how to to stop that. Like you say, it becomes your own thoughts that begin to police you, and you begin to monitor yourself and things like that. So what would be some of the steps that you can take to kind of move away from being stuck in that kind of headspace?
I think, one of the things I've noticed from listening to people, from reading the literature, that people want to recover as quick as possible. And the first thing I say to people, like, it might just take time, and it'll just be chipping away and working things out, and new situations will come up that will trigger you again, and it's okay. It might be a slower journey than you hoped for, because people are often they don't want it anymore. They're trying to drive forward.
Which that comes under that like perfectionism again, because you're applying your own perfectionism to be perfectly out of the situation of being perfectionist.
Yeah, and a part of the recovery is just saying it's going to take. I do my part, as an ex-cult member, and it's just going to take as long as it takes. And it's good in some ways because it helps them do the reading, and it helps them do the work on themselves. But it often takes time. Often as well, I think what can be quite helpful is being in environments that aren't cults, and then having someone to talk through that. A good environment is if you're a student and you go to college, and if all of a sudden you're in this environment where you're encouraged to critically think. It's like the complete opposite of what you've just been in. Diversity and difference is respected and celebrated rather than punished. So in an environment like that, in terms of recovery, is often very helpful at the right time. And generally speaking, just learning about all the theory and psychology, because when people contact me, they're very like, have I been in a cult? Have I not been in a cult? And the self-esteem is so low that they think they're the problem. There's something wrong with me. And learning about all the psychology and how they were controlled helps pick up that shame that's been put on them and put it back on the group where it belongs, because they were controlled in a lot of ways through shame and guilt. And when they come out, they still think they're the problem. So just learning about what's going on in your mind, how the brainwashing, mind control, thought reform happened, picking apart what the group did to you to make you feel bad about yourself, and then put it back where it belongs, and that's a long process as well, but that's a big part of recovery, the learning. And then as well, just sometimes in that environment to survive, you have to repress a lot of your emotions. It's quite hard to access them again sometimes. And just talking through that with a compassionate therapist can help you internalize their compassion rather than internalize the crap from the cult. And when you start internalizing their compassion and finding that self-compassion, that can unlock some of the pain. And also as well, another thing that I do with my clients as well, because it's quite difficult to access emotions, I ask them, what movies are you watching and television shows or music you're listening to that is helping you cry? And what's going on in the themes of that movie that's helping you access your emotions and makes you feel safe to cry? And sometimes that can be helpful in helping someone just process some of the pain. But the earlier steps are usually the more educational stuff. The emotional stuff tends to be healed a bit later on. Obviously there's loads of overlap. It's not that black and white because we're not a cult.
No, exactly. It's about finding the grey areas, the mystery, the space to just exist, and things like that as well. And I mean, you said talking to people about what happened and what and what you've been through and so that it can be difficult for people to find somebody that they can talk to about stuff, because some of it sounds so crazy, doesn't it? Like I know in the book he doesn't know if he used to have superpowers or not, and and that I think is part of it. I spend a lot of time around very like ordinary people, and I can't tell them like a lot of what's I have a thought reaction to something they've said or done, and I can't put it into the conversation because I'm like, this would sound like completely bonkers nuts, and then they're going to think I'm like a weirdo, so I'll just like internalize it, and then I like panic over not having said something, and then I'll just go into a little spiral, which is similar to what he goes through a lot in this book really. But so I mean, I think one of the things that I'd love this book to do and for us to do is to try and create some space where people can be safe to talk to each other, but people can be again worried about doing that because you're worried about joining another control environment and things like that. So it's difficult, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. You said something there as well that's quite important as well. That analyzing what you're thinking. Should I be thinking this? Should I not? Should I say this to them? Should I have said? And and again, from that cult environment, to survive the environment, you have to analyze everything you're saying to keep yourself psychologically safe.
Mm-hmm.
So you come out and your mind is working in overdrive for every human interaction. Did they make an idiot of themselves? Are they going to be angry at me? Are they not angry at me? Because that's how a person survives in a cult, monitoring what they're doing all the time. Because there's going to be a cost if they say I'll do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that thing about the other thing to mention and what you've just said there is, it can sound like mental illness because of the supernatural out there portion of the experience, when it's actually just part of the control mechanism. And I think that makes it a bit hard for people to come sometimes say, like, this is where my mind was, because I was being told that's the way things were. I'm manipulated. And I know for me as well, part of the reason why I more recently started speaking out about the exorcism experience I had was because, it's outrageous and it's nuts. And I had some beliefs that are off the wall, like demons are walking around in my flat and everything, like visiting me at night and all sorts of stuff, which wasn't true, but that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
But I think like it is quite important to just say this just goes on. This is what they do to you. And I wasn't mad.
No, exactly.
It's just part of the manipulation and control. And I think speaking out just helps other people feel like, well, maybe I can say some of this stuff and, feel more confident in doing that. But again, it comes.
It helps me. It helps me when I hear you tell your stories, because it reminds me that my stories are also not, are not that out there, and yours aren't, and that there's that's that link again where we can support each other, and that's really important.
Yeah, and just normalizing it. It's not. And this is the problem, isn't it, with the word cult and things like that, is people think they're wacky, extreme religious groups when actually they're just all over the place. And what it is, it's coercive control. And you put it in that frame, and it's like, well, actually, it's a form of it's like domestic abuse, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that then becomes very tangible. Then, not this wacky out there thing. It's manipulation and control. And there's all this psychological theory here that says how it works. Bringing things back to something more solid and tangible rather than supernatural, and you can't measure anything against anything because it's all like spiritual and forces and darkness and no, it's if you use this language and you block the person from connections with other people, they will then start experiencing this. It's very logical, and
that's really
that's good for recovery as well, just pinning it down to something real, so
that's really helpful. I think we've covered a lot of the stuff that at this point in the story I wanted to talk about, because I could talk about some more, but that's a bit spoilery, because the whole story is a journey of recovery. Hopefully, maybe if he makes it. So but I really appreciate that link to real life that that you give it by bringing some theory to it and explaining some things that really help it out, really. So
it's really just I suppose to recover, you just recognizing that something was done to you. It's not your fault. Everyone's mind is susceptible to manipulation and control, and there's been a lot of research into this, because this is how advertising works, but just less extreme. So it does work. We know it works. These certain behaviors. So learning about it and go, oh, actually, I can see this now. Processing the pain it's been through and growing from it and moving forward. So yeah.
That makes, how you say, it's about similar to advertising. Like it's just in all there. It's just this kind of thing is used in all areas of life, but you can end up in like a whirlpool where it's all comes together in a more extreme way, and that's when it's much more dangerous.
It's very concentrated, extreme manipulation and persuasion. To an extreme extent. It's all on a continuum, isn't it? Like persuasion. On the milder end, it's education, where you're allowed to question it and have doubts. And then a bit further up that spectrum, it's advertising, where you know what they're doing, but it's still manipulative. And it gets all the way to the other end, where it's just dangerous and toxic and causes a lot of damage.
And where can people find you to learn more of the things that you've been? Because I know you do some YouTube videos talking about all this stuff.
Yeah, I've a few different places. On my website, in the About section at the bottom, there's a list of media appearances, so people can look through there. So just done a few shows on. I've done one on BBC World Service, one for BBC Radio 5 Live, a few bits and bobs of articles and things like that, and a few YouTube interviews and things. So I'm dotted around everywhere.
Cool. Okay, yeah, and I'll include I'll put some links on the main blog page where people can find you. So this should be on Christmas, so we'll wish everyone a happy Christmas. I hope you found that as interesting and helpful as I have. I always find that I really enjoy having these kind of conversations because it makes me feel less alone and less isolated in the things that I've experienced or seen or gone through. I hope that you have a really happy Christmas and get a chance to relax in whatever ways that you can. And we will see you tomorrow on Boxing Day as Harry heads to Manchester to speak to Lizzie.